Good afternoon. It's 2 o'clock. We will call this City Council workshop of February 28, 2024 to order. This will be both a physical meeting and a virtual meeting. Some members of city staff or consultants may be participating via teleconference. Councilmember Wiesner is attending remotely. Today's meeting may be viewed live on YouTube, Facebook, and available for viewing after the meeting on cable channel 10 HD 1090. Just for everyone's knowledge, we are having weather technical difficulties, so there may be some delays or some issues, but we're doing the best we can. Public comment is not normally taken at workshop meetings, although the council may allow or request public participation. We have no items for action on our agenda today. I would like to acknowledge our very full audience that is here in support of the pickleball courts. Thank you. It's great to see all of you out here. We enjoy seeing you all here. So I'll move on to my announcements. Many of you know that there have been some changes. You good? Okay. Many of you know that there have been some changes recently in city leadership. I would like to share the update that I have sent to everyone at the city on Friday of last week. I have decided to take the city in a new direction that provides more positive leadership. Leadership starts from the top down. We are all responsible to the city and our constituents. The work we do creates long-term impacts for this community. With that in mind, I am making changes to my leadership team. Blaine Oborn is no longer with the city. I have promoted Sabrina Combs to Deputy City Administrator. This change includes having finance, accounting, and utility billing continue to report to our other Deputy City Administrator, David Goldman, and fire, human resources, and police reporting to me directly. Administration, Development Services, Parks and Recreation, and Public Works will report to Sabrina. When I ran for mayor, part of my reason for running was because I wanted the community to see how great the city staff is and the number of projects you are all working on. When I am making decisions for the city, I am considering all the factors with you and the community in mind. These are the difficult decisions, and change is hard. However, it is necessary for the growth of our team and the community. Please contact Mikhail if you have any questions for me. I have an open door policy and I'm doing my best to get around to see each of you in your departments since taking office. I appreciate the work you are doing to make the community great. I also wanted to share a compliment that we received earlier this week on one of our employees in utility billing, Kim Schmall, of our finance staff that I received this week. I just want to say a few words about Kim. She's very friendly, helpful, and she takes her job very seriously and professionally, was the item sent in. Thank you, Kim, for your kindness and best customer service. Kim and those at the front desk of City Hall are often the face of the city to our community. Thank you to Kim and all of our employees who serve our community. You're doing a great job. With that, we'll move into our first agenda item, and that's Parks and Recreation, Professional Services Agreement with Framework for the City Art Plan. And introducing this issue will be our Parks Director, Brian Smith.
You'll have to bear with me. I'm a little under the weather today. As much as I'd like to be home wrapped in a blanket, having some hot chocolate, just can't stay away and enjoy your beautiful faces today. So we're going to have a little bit of discussion about a city arts plan, and want to talk a little bit about why arts matters in the community. In Washington State, the arts and culture sector was a $72.9 billion industry. In 2021, roughly about 10.8% of the state's GDP, representing 187,196 jobs. That's 5.2% of Washington's workforce, and total compensation of $33.9 billion that goes back into the economy. In April of 2023, Island County, the town of Coupeville, and the cities of Langley and Oak Harbor voted to cost share the development of a comprehensive economic development strategy for Island County. The EDC will oversee this process. There's quite a bit of public funding that is available and received by the public sectors in Washington State. Washington State arts and culture sector brought in $8.2 million from state appropriations, almost $1 million from National Endowment of the Arts state grants, and $3.1 million in National Endowment of the Arts direct grants to local government municipal organizations, and $3.1 million in Small Business Administration SVOG grants, which is the Shuttered Venue Operations Grant, part of the American Rescue Plan Act. And that program includes over $16 billion in grants to performing arts venues to be administered through the SBA's Office of Disaster Assistance. So at a series of workshop sessions, the City of Oak Harbor Arts Commission identified priorities that aligned with the powers and duties set during the creation of the Arts Commission, as well as feedback from council in establishing better procedures for the acquisition and placement of public art and the desire for arts programming. The Arts Commission established the creation of a city arts plan as priority number one. Staff requested proposals from a consulting firm to assist with developing an arts plan that will create a shared vision and process for public art placement, art programs, cultural events, funding, and partnership opportunities for the city. The arts plan focuses on developing creative strategies that will guide the work of the city through 2023. The resulting arts plan will bolster the city's existing work, providing guiding principles and procedures, establish a shared vision, identify and prioritize goals and strategies, explore new opportunities for placemaking and sync with the overall city mission, and give direction on leveraging resources. The goal is to uncover Oak Harbor's creative assets and recommend strategies to build on those assets to strengthen the community. The plan will be based upon extensive community input, research of arts industry best practices and trends, analysis of the city's creative assets, discovery of new opportunities, and analysis of existing funding sources and research funding opportunities. So basically this provides a framework that informs council and the Arts Commission recommendations to council on how to best utilize the Creative Arts Fund, and provides us a roadmap on how to better support a cultural arts centered city. We received proposals from 3 different firms, and those were evaluated through members of the Arts Commission and staff. We looked for a firm that had done plans for a variety of communities. Art plans have been used with great success in several communities to help bolster the economy and provide a attractive place for both visitors and residents. We wanted to find a firm that had an innovative engagement plan on how to do outreach efforts and engage the community in contributing to the arts plan and help us define the character that we want to showcase to the world of what represents Oak Harbor and why visitors should come here and spend their dollars. We wanted a firm that was creative in their use of multimedia exhibitions and help us to develop and build a good arts website. Arts websites are super vital for any city in order to not only showcase the public art pieces we have, but also provide a process for call for art, help support art programs from associations and organizations around the community, and also provide a voluntary registration for local artists so they can find work and showcase their efforts around the community. And then we wanted to make sure the firm understood the connection between economic development and funding opportunities, the funding mechanisms that we have in place right now for the creative arts, and be able to integrate that into the plan so that we can make good financial decisions, as well as good community-led decisions in placement of public art and creating public places that the community feels like represents what we want to display to the world. So framework was the firm that we selected, staff and the review committee of the Arts Commissioners, is recommending them based on their experience, local presence, staff credentials, and ability to perform high-quality work within a budget and meet schedules. Framework submitted a proposal for professional services in the amount of $75,875. Their work plan was outlined in the proposal through 6 phases. Phase 1, which would happen this spring if council were to approve this, would be to do a kickoff with project setup, research. We would do an information dump with them. They would come and do interviews with local stakeholders, meet with advisory committees, meet with council. They would take all that input and feedback that we give them and put together a draft plan. That would be run through council, and then we'll have a secondary stakeholder confirmation and some open houses with the community. Those draft plans and tools will then come back and be presented to council for adoption this fall. This is a little bit of a schedule of the time frame for each of those phases. So the staff recommendation is to move forward with the art plan, professional service with framework for $75,875. This is the recommendation from the Arts Commission as well. Funding exists in Fund 115 Creative Arts Fund for this. If approved, staff will include this amount in the mid-year 2024 budget amendment for council approval. And staff will bring this item to council at the next regular session for further discussion and to take an action item. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an overview of the process and what we're looking for with this plan. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Great, thanks, Brian. So at this time, I'd turn it over to council for questions or comments. Yes, Councilmember Stuckey.
Just to give a little feedback, I think this is a wonderful idea. I mean, there may be folks who say, oh, great, here goes the city spending another $75,000 on yet another consultant. First of all, as you said, the money's coming out of the arts budget, correct? Which,
Correct.
as I continue to say, can only be used for art.
Correct.
And I think having a plan definitely will help us all get on the same page. I mean, let's be honest, in the last few years, at least since I've been up here, there at times been a little bit of rift between us and the Arts Commission. I think that just comes to coming together with a shared vision. And I think something like this can definitely get us all on the same page and help give a little more focus to the art that we're getting and working harder to get community feedback. So I think that this is a wonderful idea. Would I prefer not to spend $75K? Of course. But I think it's something we need to do. So I'm in favor of it, personally.
Thank you, Councilmember Stuckey. Anyone else? Comments, questions? Yes, Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Brian. I hope you feel better soon. I guess the one thing that really kind of struck me is it says the Economic Development Council for Island County will advocate for programs and policies which support the arts and culture community. Are they not currently doing that? I mean, isn't that kind of what they should be doing for us at the present? Or is this...
I would hope so. I don't have a lot of involvement yet with them, but I'm
Okay.
hoping through this process that we build a good bridge and relationship with them
Okay.
and have them as a prime stakeholder in this process. Yeah.
Great, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Marshall. Anyone else? Comments, questions? Hearing none, we'll move forward to the RWD agreement for pickleball courts, and speaking with us will be our Parks Director, Brian Smith.
Okay. Thanks, Tim. So at the April 26th workshop last year in 2023, staff provided City Council with an update on the Memorandum of Understanding with the Oak Harbor Public School District to improve the district's pickleball courts. The cost estimate for the project came in well above the $50,000 of REIT 2 funding allocated by the city for the project. I'll give just a very, very brief history on that. So we had set a project to be done at Neal Park for new pickleball courts. $50,000 of REIT funding was allocated for that, and that was half of the project. The other half was supposed to come out of donations. That never came to fruition. There was never any donations received. There was turnover within the department, and so the project never kind of went forward. The city finally decided to take that $50,000 they had allocated for that and put it towards renovating the school district's courts at Rotary Park. When we came in to do the project, we got the cost estimates, and it was well above that. It's about $190,000 to renovate the courts. Came back and decided, well, let's go forward and do a plan. We'll take the $50,000 to go ahead and do that. That's where the $50,000 came from. So council indicated they would prefer the funding to be used for design and planning of the new pickleball courts on city property, as recommended by the Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission. Staff worked with the Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission in development of a scope for professional services and solicited proposals in November of 2023. Staff received 6 inquiries from contractors and 2 full proposals for professional services for local planning and design, location planning and design. Staff reviewed the proposals. One of the vendors was dropped due to exceptions with insurance requirements, and RWD was selected. The Parks and Recreation Commission had identified 4 possible locations: Sumner Park, Fort Nugent Park, Windjammer Park, and Neil Holland Gardens Park. We had RWD come and do a site visit to evaluate each of those positions. So staff and RWD researched both Sumner and Fort Nugent as the top picks after doing site visits. With regards to the requirements the project will need to meet to conform with our municipal code, Sumner Park will require at least some, if not extensive, right-of-way parking and buffer improvements. The playground would need to be removed, which we don't really recommend eliminating the playground from this neighborhood park. There are playgrounds within a half-mile radius of the park, but they're located on school district property. Although the site appeared to be a perfect fit, it's very flat, nicely graded. The threat of the additional costs resulting from compliance with our code eliminates it from consideration as the first location for a court complex, but a possible secondary location for a smaller configuration in the future. And we would like to install multiple pickleball court sites around the city. So we're looking into Fort Nugent as a possible location for the pickleball courts. We're currently conducting geotechnical testing with plans that include 2 test pits to inspect the soils, and that's going on right now. So RWD's proposal for the scope of the project is to prepare bid and construction-ready documentation for up to 8 pickleball courts with full ADA access, protective fencing, and amenities such as benches and picnic tables and all that kind of infrastructure as the budget allows. Scope of services is broken into 3 progressive design phases of 30, 95, and 100% design, and we can vet those phases through council to get your feedback on it as we go along. So the total for all phases for the planning and design is $78,100. As I mentioned before, we already have the $50,000 that has been approved from the previous project for design and planning of the project. We are pursuing 2 grants for the implementation and construction of the courts. They also allow for design reimbursements, so we can reimburse ourselves for part of that design if we're awarded these grants. One of them is the Communities Outdoor Athletic Facilities Grant. It's a $1.2 million grant, and it has no match requirement. The other is the Youth Athletic Facilities Grant, which is a $1.5 million grant. It has a 40% match requirement. We did get an email today from the Recreation Conservation Office on the application, and they're excited to work with us on that, and we've already started that process. And as I mentioned, 20% of the grant revenue may be spent on planning and design. Also note that we've had a couple of meetings with Representative Clive Shavers. He's pretty interested in supporting the facility construction during the next legislative session budgeting process, so that's something that we'll also put in for next year. The notice of award for these 2 RCO grants is spring of next year, and we would be able to begin construction as early as July of 2025. So staff's recommendation is to award the professional services agreement to RWD, and we'll bring this item back to City Council at the next regular session. As far as timing, the survey geotech will take about 4 weeks or so, and then we will have permitting, and we could have the plans fairly finalized as early as fall, and I have Don Campbell with RWD is on the meeting and can help answer any questions. I'll also note that the additional $28,000 can be pulled from the same REIT 2 funding that the original $50,000 is from as well. And either I or Don are happy to answer any questions that you have.
Great, thanks, Brian. Now I will turn it over to council for any questions or comments. Councilmember Stuckey.
First, let me say how delightful it is to see so many picklers in the audience. I had to get one in. Do we have, obviously this is why you do studies, but do we have just a swath of a guess of what a cost like this would be to implement?
For construction?
Yes. I mean, I see that the other phases there, to get to that, but just
Yeah.
any kind of a ballpark. I don't have a concept.
Yeah. So we'll get cost estimates through this planning process. I'll just say that I did 4 post-tension concrete courts with quite a bit of extensive geotech work for about $400,000. I would guesstimate, if we were to do 8 courts, that's going to probably be double that. Construction costs have gone up a lot, though, in the last several years, almost doubling in certain aspects. I think you could probably roughly guesstimate $800,000 to $1 million is going to be a good ballpark, and that's about what we're targeting with these grants.
And these grants, are they highly competitive? I mean, do you have an idea on? I guess what my thought process I'm trying to get to is, we say, hey, let's do this for the 78,000, get the phases, find out it's 1.5 million. We've got no grants, and then we have a plan we paid for, and funding is an issue. So are these very competitive grants, or are these something like, oh, there's a good chance we may get these? Obviously, nothing's set in stone until it's
Of course, all
done.
the grants are competitive, but we've had pretty good success with RCO grants in the past. And the fact that we have good legislative support for these
Sure.
projects, I think, gives us an advantage.
Because we still have the Windjammer Park improvement money.
Yeah.
And maybe this might be a question for Sabrina. Can you remind me, was pickleball, when we did that survey, was pickleball up there, or and I honestly don't remember.
I don't believe that pickleball was up there. It was in some of the submissions, but in our top recommendations, I don't believe we listed pickleball as one of the items. There were some other items that were a higher priority that staff ended up recommending.
So it would have been like a write-in, it wouldn't have been one of
No,
the
it was, it was write-in items, and there was a number of them, but I'd have to pull the numbers to give you the exact numbers.
Okay.
I think in some of the conceptual designs that we had done for improvements, pickleball was one of the things that was listed there. But that was pretty early on in the process.
Well, there's no doubt it's a popular sport, I'm told. I got to try it sometime, but it always comes down to funding, and we'll see where it go.
Yeah. And, our staff are pretty relentless in funding, and we've had really good success over the last year. We've brought in over $3 million in grant funding. So that, along with, we have the park implementation plan, that's about $360,000. I'm going to give a ballpark, don't hold me to these exact numbers, but $360,000. And then, as you mentioned, Windjammer Park has a little bit over $1 million in funding for those improvements. Some of the improvements we had recommended to council were repair the shoreline, enhance the pavilions for events, fix the splash park, improve picnic options and add shelters, provide shaded areas, and then improvements to the interpretive center. So out of those 7, the shoreline, we're moving over to a larger city project, shoreline restoration project. The pavilion is going to have to be a separate project. The Arts Commission is working on that, so that would be taken out of that. The splash park we're already doing, council's approved that, and that's gone forward. We're working on the picnic shelters right now, as well as the shaded areas, and then the interpretive center improvements are, we're working on those. So we have about $1 million that we can put towards some of these other Windjammer projects like the ball fields, and that's something that we're going to be bringing back to council. We have a bid for $163,000 for improvement of the infields at the ball fields, as well as we'll have discussions about dog parks and different things like that. So there might be some opportunity to provide some matching of those grant funds with funds like that.
Sure. I just get a little nervous about the Windjammer improvements when we put so much effort into getting feedback. You know, I understand the pickleball courts we're riding, but to get all that effort into feedback and say, nah, let's do it for something that wasn't on the top of the list, that can make me a little nervous optically.
So I was able to pull up the data, and it was, of the improvements, it was 21 in the list. So of the top, we had the top 20 that we listed for you, and then 21 would have been pickleball, because that was the first item that we listed, and the other items that were listed under that.
But we're not looking to fund this with Windjammer funds.
Sure. And last question, was there any general thoughts from the Park and Recreation Commission? Is this something that everyone's kind of on board with, or?
Yeah, so we had them as part of our review committee, and they have recommended council to go forward with the proposal with RWD.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Stuckey. Anyone else with questions or comments for, yes, Councilmember Wittgenstein.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, everybody, for being here in support of the pickleball. Couple of questions. Any update from Representative Shavers on how he feels he can best represent us in this matter, and anything from Representative Paul either? Is he, someone we've been talking to as well to get on board with that?
It's an ongoing discussion. So I met with him and the executive director with Boys and Girls Club, just to talk about the $250,000 that the state had given them for their multi-use sports courts, and if there's a good alignment with that and the city project. So Representative Shavers was the one that recommended that we go after a larger $1 million ask of the state during their regular session instead of their supplemental session that they're in right now. So he did bring forward the rec center feasibility study as part of the House's package funding for this cycle, and then is looking for that sports complex in the next regular session.
And then my other question is really, in this particular project that we're looking at, and I would imagine if Fort Nugent pans out and there's 8 courts, have we even thought about making sure one of them or 2 of them are covered for all year-round use?
Yeah, that's something that's been brought up as part of the planning and design. It's not just design, but also planning on what does the community need. The Parks and Recreation Commission originally was looking at 12 courts. Wanted to scale that back a little bit just to make sure that we could secure funding for it. But we do have in there the ability to expand if needed. There are other things we talked about, lighting, covering, all those, affect the budget. So part of what the RWD will do in this planning process is to give us some cost estimates on what different amenities with these complexes will be, and we can have a discussion with council on, what's your pleasure? Do we want to spend more money to have the courts covered or lit, or maybe we want to provide less courts or more courts? It'll be a collaborative process with the community and council to make sure that everyone is as happy as possible with what we actually end up implementing and constructing.
Well, I'm totally in favor with going forward with this as well, and I would encourage us to do a minimum of 8 courts, even if we scatter them around the city. And we need some covered with lighting. I think to build it initially and not do that would be a waste of resources and funds from our community. Having grown up here my whole life, there's 5 months of the year I can play outside. The rest of the time I'm, dealing with wind and rain and occasionally snow, I guess, because, second winter finally hit. So just something to consider. I think it just behoove us to make sure we're spending it as wisely as possible now versus trying to add roof and lighting later when, it would be significantly higher with the increase of construction costs. So I'm on board with that.
Thank you, Councilmember Wittgenstein. Anyone else with questions or comments for Brian? Oh, yes, Councilmember Hoffmeyer.
Yeah, I was just going to say real quick, you know, it's nice to see 24 people here supporting pickleball courts. I definitely support this phase of it and look forward to your push to get the funding. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hoffmeyer. Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Brian, will they explore all 4 of these possible locations, or have we narrowed it down to just the Fort Nugent Park?
Yeah, I think we're focusing on Fort Nugent now. We originally looked at all 4. Sumner and Fort Nugent were the most attractive with the layout and the infrastructure. Sumner was just going to be more expensive. Fort Nugent already has the parking, restroom facilities, and good drainage, and you know, and the ability to expand a little bit if we need to. So, you know, if we also, the proximity to some of the other amenities in the park, you know, I'd like to put in lighting for the football fields. If we're to do that, maybe we can kind of dual use that with the courts as well. So there's just a lot of things that made it attractive.
I guess my only concern with Fort Nugent is parking, right? When we have football there, we have soccer going on. I mean, just those 2 sports alone can pack up both of those fields or both the parking lots. And so if we're adding an additional pickleball tournament or pickleball players, you know, what does that do to our parking and the neighborhoods that are surround that area? Because I mean, we're already getting parking on the street there as well. And so is there any possibility of expanding that parking just a little bit further over and adding more spaces? Or
Yeah, we talked about that quite extensively with RWD. That was the only, not necessarily a drawback, but something for consideration was how many activities we already have programmed at the park, and exactly parking and additional restrooms were kind of the 2 things we identified.
Right.
So I think it's good timing and alignment with, you know, the school district looking at their levy that would build a school at the site. We would have to reconfigure the entry and parking for the park anyway. And so we're, like we had talked with council, we're looking at expanding the park possibly to the south, looking at different options to provide a different entries besides just the one. But I think regardless, we want to look at how to reconfigure the parking to add a little more. Right now, we're already fairly busting at the seams on a busy day during
Right.
the season, so it's something that we'll be looking at.
Okay. And this may be a question for Mr. Goldman, but do we have an idea of what our REIT budget is? I mean, because I know we just agreed to take a sizable chunk out to redo some of the parks and stuff. And so do we have a fund balance that this would sustain in the REIT?
Are you talking about for the design or for the implementation?
Yeah, just for the additional, the additional
28,000,
28,000. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure what our fund balance is in that REIT pool. And so I just want to make sure that we have adequate funds if we were going to approve something like
Yeah,
this.
I know David's out. I don't think he's
Mr.
here.
Goldman is
Heidi's in the other room.
Actually, Ms. Chaz
Oh,
Webster's
Chaz.
here
Oh.
filling in, so.
Hi. I'm going to actually have Heidi come up, but she's going to have that fund balance for you. Just a moment.
Team effort.
I know she's really excited.
I'm Heidi Childs in the Finance Department, Senior Accountant. And as far as I know, we have monies for projects in REIT 2 available.
I assume we'll get confirmation of that before we actually approve this.
There's like $1 million something,
Okay.
I think.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Marshall. Any other questions or comments besides let's go shopping? All right.
I would like to amend the 28,000 to
Thank you, Brian. You're done. Thank you.
You're done.
Thanks, Brian. All right, we're going to move on to development services, and with that 2024 comprehensive plan docket. And introducing that will be our principal planner, Kak Kamek, to present. Thank you. We'll give you a minute.
I swear to God.
The popular stuff is done.
I was really thinking you guys were all here for police staff. Clearly, pickleball.
Right.
No.
We were just letting people leave the room, that's it. So, I don't know.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council, CAC-COMAC Principal Planner. I have a few slides to help us share some information on the comprehensive plan amendment docket for the upcoming year. I can move it with this. Yeah. All right. Oh, thank you. All right. So just to, as you are aware, probably the comprehensive plan can be amended only once a year, and that's just based on our RCW. So we have a process to amend it, and the process starts by compiling docket items in December of every year, and then having the Planning Commission review it, with it coming forward to the City Council in March. So we'll kind of go in the middle of that process, and just wanted to workshop some of the items with the council before it came forward at the March meeting. So this year is going to be slightly different because we have the state requirement to do a major update to our comprehensive plan. And they have provided funding for it, and we have applied for grants, and so this entire effort to update the plan for the state requirement is going to be funded by grants. And they have a slightly different schedule of June 2025. So normally we do our amendments at the end of the year. However, for this current cycle, they have asked for the amendments to be done by June of 2025, which is a mid-year cycle. So what we're going to suggest that the council do is take all the docket items that we have that we're currently working on and put it under the umbrella of the 2025 update, because we will tackle a lot of those topics as we update the major, do the major update to the comprehensive plan. So what is on the docket that's moving forward? I'm calling it the 2024-2025 docket because I think we will not be making any amendments in December of '24, but we'll be doing all the amendments possible in the 2025 June schedule. So what's covered under that is the implementation of the Housing Action Plan. These are items that are already in our docket. We will continue to work on them. We've already got some grant funding to look at the missing middle housing. So having to have development regulations be written for those. So we're already working on that. The JPA and UGA, this is another item that's already in the docket. Again, we'll be covering it with our 2025 update because of the housing allocations. We talked about this with the countywide planning policies, which will be also coming forward fairly soon. We know that we have a lot of housing allocated towards us. So that's a big discussion in the JPA and the UGA area. So we'll cover that under the 2025 major update. And then we have the general requirements of other segments of the comprehensive plan that need to be updated for state law. So we'll have that as well. So for all of this, we have consultant help, and again, that's all funded by grants. We normally also include our 6-year capital improvements plan in the annual update process. This can continue to do so. We can update it along with the budget. That's something that the state law allows. We normally do it with our comp plan update, but this year, maybe we'll adopt it with the budget. So we can determine where we are and make that determination. What's also on the docket is the central development area. This is one of those topics that the council, I think, rated pretty high in your retreat. This will be a process that will potentially parallel the comprehensive plan update process, or it could be at a different schedule. So what we'll have to make sure is that the policies are not inconsistent with each other as we update our comprehensive plan and look at a sub-area plan, which is what the central development area would be, is a sub-area plan. So we'll have to make sure and we'll coordinate that process. What's also on the docket is an alternate street connection plan. This is something our engineering department wanted to do, to consider alternate connections and street connections throughout the city. This again can take its own schedule, or if there's an opportunity to update our transportation element in the comprehensive plan with the funding that we have, we could tackle some of that through that process as well. So a lot of items, a lot of ideas, and a lot of changes, so to speak, to our comprehensive plan coming forward this year. So it's going to be a busy year. They'll probably start off with the visioning process. There'll be land capacity analysis that's done to help with a lot of the decision making. So we'll be moving at a pretty fast pace, trying to meet that June 2025 schedule. So a lot of things on our docket. I've compiled it into these 4 items. We'll be presenting these items at the next regular council meeting for action. So wanted to bring it to you here before we do that. So with that, I will take any questions, comments, or thoughts on it.
All right, thank you, CAC. So with that, I will turn it over to City Council for questions or comments. None? All right, hearing none. Thank you, CAC, for your presentation. We will move on to the finance section. And with that, we will have the WAIF animal licensing efficiencies. Speaking to us today and introducing this topic is our finance manager, Chaz Webster, to present.
All right. Good to go? Okay. Bring this down a little bit. Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, and staff. Chaz Webster, Finance Manager, and today we'll be talking about animal licensing and WAIF. So first we'll begin with just a list of our topics. So review of the licensing code, our current process, why change the process, vendor pricing comparisons, public city advantages, and then our gained efficiencies, effectiveness, and economy. So here's a brief overview of our code. The city requires licensing of cats and dogs over 4 months of age. The license application must include the current rabies certificate and proof of spay or neuter for a discount. Annual license is by calendar date. It expires at the end of the year. Dangerous and potentially dangerous dogs must be registered and licensed, and failure to obtain a license is subject to a Class 2 infraction. So our current process, we take our license applications either in person or online. Online consists of filling out the form, which is then submitted to the office electronically. The pet owner then must email the rabies certificate and proof of spay or neuter to the utilities office, and then the payment's taken over the phone. We process those licenses during our normal business hours, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:30, of course excluding weekends and holidays. We do not have, at this moment, a dedicated payment system online for citizens to pay for animal licenses. We purchase about 700 regular tags per year and 100 special tags. The special tags are for the dangerous and potentially dangerous dogs. We destroy about 200 to 300 regular tags per year and about 80 of those special tags, because these tags are pre-printed. They come with an expiration date for the end of the year, so we can't use them the following year. Our EDEN system is not cloud-based, nor does it have mobile access for the animal control officer. So he can only access the EDEN system while he's on site or by calling the utility staff. And our EDEN licensing system is not set up to issue renewal reminders. All right. So why change the process? Well, we have an opportunity to increase convenience to the public. With WAIF, they've got 2 locations, one in Coopville and Oak Harbor. We have an opportunity to increase compliance, so as pet owners adopt at WAIF, licensing can take place simultaneously with adoption paperwork at the shelter. They no longer have to make a separate trip here to City Hall and find time to do that during the week. We have an opportunity to utilize the vendor's software efficiencies. So WAIF has a shelter management program. It provides more access to the ACO for pet owner contact information that's readily available, and that thereby increases communications for the ACO. It is recommended by finance, the police department, and administration. We will have administrative relief to city staff. We currently answer about 50 calls a day regularly. for all city business, and we could spend, 20 minutes with a pet owner just to complete that licensing process. There's a cost savings to the city. As WAIF would take on the administration of animal licensing, there's no fee to the city, and we would receive these funds weekly. And again, there's an additional point of service location for our citizens in Coupeville and Oak Harbor, and we would be partnering with a local agency specializing in licensing. We did do our homework. We did some research with several vendors, and I want to give a special thanks out to Jenny Matthews. She's our lead cashier. She spent a lot of time coordinating these calls, demos, meetings, and follow-up documentation with the vendors. You'll find that in this list, in this chart, our most economical option is WAIF. We had startup costs quoted between $1,000 to $7,200, credit card fees and annual subscriptions. We just wanted a cost-effective way to pay these, to pay those fees when our annual, we didn't have a cost-effective way to pay those fees when our annual revenue may be about $6,000 to $7,000. So we looked at that and we said, that's not going to happen. But then we met with WAIF, and the sun came out, the clouds lifted, the birds began chirping, and we felt this is a great opportunity to partner with a local agency that specializes in adoption and licensing who already works with the county. And per the chart, the only fee with WAIF is $2.95. That's an administrative fee to the pet owner if they license online. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, with WAIF, we get our revenue remittance weekly. So what are our public and city advantages? For the public, there's a convenience of 24/7 online licensing. They will get renewal reminders. There's those 2 locations to serve. The convenient licensing at time of adoption or impound, because I will share with you that one of our major complaints from our citizens is that their 4-legged family member who couldn't be released from impound, or what we lovingly refer to as doggy jail, they couldn't be released without a license, and we weren't there available during the weekend. So partnering with WAIF will certainly cure that issue. There's not going to be an increase to our city licensing at this time, to cover costs, because there's really no cost to switching. And also WAIF has a lost found pet reunification program, so that's a good advantage. And then our advantages to the city, of course, increased compliance, and with increased compliance, we'll have increased revenue. Increased communication availability for the ACO, increased public health and welfare, which is our whole point of licensing animals, increased staff availability for additional projects and tasks, and it lowers our cost of administration. So partnering with WAIF, my summary is, of course, we're going to have our additional service locations. They have a strong local and web presence. They have a community outreach. Convenience of the 24/7 online access to licensing, licensing at time of adoption or impound. The ACO will have mobile access to a shelter management software. There is no startup costs, monthly costs, subscription costs, or additional fees other than $2.95 per license online. This lowers the cost of administration of the pet licenses for the city. It will increase staff availability for other projects. And if the owner moves between county and city locations, their information's in WAIF system. All right, so next steps, the finance and police departments, we're looking forward to partnering with WAIF. We're seeking council consideration and approval for mayor signature on a local agreement. It would be brought forward at a later council meeting. We're hoping to have this new service in place by May 1st. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chaz. Are there any questions? Yes, Councilmember Hoffmeyer.
Is the ACO available today?
I don't know. It's not in here. Woodward?
I'm happy to speak on that behalf.
Cool. The question I had is, there are some cities in Washington State, for instance, that are doing away with the animal licenses altogether. And I think, to see that we sold 500 licenses a year when, I don't know what the number is, but maybe there's 10,000 pets in Oak Harbor, for instance. As microchips have become more readily available at the vet for $50, $60, almost every pet seems to get microchipped. why continue with the animal license at all, was my question. And thought maybe the ACO would know, but maybe Chief Slowick has an idea?
I think the public health aspect is very important on this, and I think the other part is the safety of our community and the quality of life with our community. So when we bring this forward to City Council, I can make sure that that's included in the presentation, and I can make sure that the ACO is available for those questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and very gracious for WAIF being willing to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hoffmeyer. Councilmember Stuckey.
Not yet, Chief. I'm going to make a sweeping assumption, and you correct me if I'm wrong. Would it be safe to say that there's probably a large amount of pets that are not registered?
Yeah, I would say talking with WAIF, who manages Island County's licensing, and talking with our animal control officer, the renewal portion of licensing is difficult for us because we don't have an auto renewal system where we can remind people to get their pets licensed. So a lot of times we get that initial pet license happen, and then the owners don't renew their license, and we don't have that tool. This will actually create that tool where we can increase compliance.
And maybe it was in there. Let's just assume I didn't register my pet.
Yep.
I have an indoor cat. It's probably never going to be an issue. But what is the fine, so to speak, if I were not to register a pet?
$25.
Even
Plus a
an
late fee of $5.
so even an unneutered pet?
Yeah. So if it's not neutered or spayed, it's a $40. So you're going to end up paying $40 for the license, $5 for the late, and $25 for the fee, for the fine. If it's neutered, it's $10.
But if I'm correct then, and I'm caught, it's almost cheaper for me to not register my pet and just get caught.
Unless it's impounded, there's impound fees.
Oh, just like a car.
Yes.
I mean, I understand it from like a, hey, let's help get loved ones back with their four-legged friends. I get that. I also can understand a dangerous animal if they bite or something like that. But is this common in other cities? I mean, I'm kind of getting to, I almost would prefer something like this to be optional rather than mandatory. I know it's mandatory now.
So what I understand from licensing, it's so that they are getting their rabies shots and that they're going to be spayed or neutered to, we give that discount, $10 versus the $40, because we want to promote the spay or neuter. But the licensing is, to support the public health welfare. It's for the rabies, because we are requiring the rabies in order to license.
Sure. I mean, again, I don't know how I feel about being mandatory, but that's not the discussion here. I think as far as this goes, yeah, I'd be all for, if we're going to keep it, switching it over to WAIF with an auto renew and reminding the public a little bit easier. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Stuckey. Councilmember Heisen, Mayor Pro Tem Heisen, I'm sorry.
No worries. My question is also probably going to be for Chief Slowick about the animal control officer. On the pros and cons, there was the issue of Eden not communicating with the animal control officer online, but on the pros, that was a con. And then on the pros, it was, better communication. So how exactly would the communication between the animal control officer and WAIF be improved by this system?
Yeah, so there's the shelter management software, which is what WAIF uses for their pet licensing, would be available online to the animal control officer and potentially all of the Oak Harbor Police Department. If we find a pet and we have a scanner where we can read their microchip, we can reunite that pet with the owner without having to go to the shelter. And that's really our goal, is to prevent that, from us having to take the time to go to the shelter, board the animal, and then paying those fines and then reuniting the animal there. So this actually helps the community and potentially getting us the pets back with owners.
Okay, perfect. So they have their own software, and
They
that
do.
will be available.
And it's an online access to it.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
we currently do not have that. Right now, it is us during Monday through Friday when staff is working that we get the list.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Anyone else with questions or comments? Yes, Councilmember Wittgenstein.
Thank you. And again, reiterating, this is really no cost to us. This is removing a service that we were trying to do that we were doing it pretty poorly, it sounds like, and not efficiently enough to help support the animal control officer in their job. So I like free programs. I think that's a great idea. I did have one question also for Chief, because we want to keep him on his toes, I guess. What's our average citations we're writing to folks within our city limits? Are we writing a lot of them? Are people really getting fined, or?
Yeah, you're talking about for late licensing? I'll have to get that information.
Late licensing, not being licensed when the animal's picked up? Or,
often, if the pet is not licensed, then we'll give warnings we want to get compliance, and oftentimes our officers will be giving warnings for that. That'll then get referred to the animal control officer to look at how many times they've been issued warnings. Often it's multiple times before a fine is issued.
Okay.
I don't have those exact numbers, but I can get that for you.
That's perfect, thank you. That's a note for all the Husky owners out there, get them licensed.
Thank you, Councilmember Wigginstein. Anyone else? All right, with that, thank you very much, Chaz. We're going to move on to the Fire Department and Island County Department Emergency Management Report. And speaking to us will be Deputy Chief Mike Buxton, as well as Eric Brooks, Deputy Director of Island County Department of Emergency Management.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Gordy Olson. I'm your new interim fire chief. So I just wanted to say hi, and I look forward to meeting all of you. Yes, with us today with Chief Buxton and myself is Eric Brooks, who's the Director of Island County Department of Emergency Management. So he's going to present to us today a review of the DEM services and the benefits to our community via the Oak Harbor Partnership.
Thank you, Chief. I'm not used to having you here yet, so thank you very much for speaking up.
So I'm Eric Brooks, Emergency Management for Island County, and I do want to start by saying I got my dog license yesterday, so I'm ahead of the game on that one. So. I really did, so. Oh, there we go. Okay, so looking at the slide here, emergency management is a continuous cycle of response, preparedness, mitigation, and recovery. And our relationship with Oak Harbor has been seamless in all of these phases of emergency management. I noticed in the Oak Harbor CEMP, you call them emergency management concepts. Same thing, it's just a constant cycle, and building relationships is probably the single most important thing that we do in emergency management. And as we say, it's important to build these relationships early. It's time to build them and meet people. It's not after or during emergencies, but it's before those emergencies happen. So we got emergency plans. We have a lot of them. Our primary plans is the comprehensive emergency management plan, as well as the multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan. Both Island County and Oak Harbor have CEMPs, and we make sure that both of our plans are written together so they work together. The multi-jurisdiction hazard mitigation plan includes all the different fire jurisdictions as well as the municipalities, and again, we collaborate and coordinate heavily on those plans as well. So community preparedness is really one of the most important things in getting ready for emergencies. And we do a lot of emergency preparedness activities with the City of Oak Harbor. This slideshow up here is from, I believe it's Home Depot. We do a lot of different ones and we collaborate with it. We also do a lot of different training activities, which we'll talk about a little bit later as well. But that's really the benchmark. The big thing that we want to do is to make sure that the community is prepared ahead of time. It used to be 3 days, 3 ways. We've recently gone to, not recently, but for a while, we've gone to a much longer period, like at least 2 weeks ready. So with that, we do a lot of outreach, and it's not just during these community events. We do a lot of training, we do a lot of public speaking, we do a lot of outreach to schools. So it's a constant effort to make sure that people are prepared. One of the bigger events that we've held in the City of Oak Harbor is a preparedness fair. We used to do this every year. COVID put a damper to that one, but in 2023, we brought the preparedness fair back. It's a relatively large event, at least for our area it is. We bring a lot of subject matter experts and different utilities, different infrastructure managers, different departments and agencies, and we bring them all together for a 4-hour event in collaboration with Oak Harbor. We provide training to the community, provide a lot of information, a lot of good stuff in order to get people prepared. In addition to the preparedness fair, I should say in addition to just the preparedness fair, during it we held a lot of training sessions such as CPR, such as cribbing, a lot of hands-on type events that we could do, just to give them a little bit of a taste of what we actually do in some of the classes that we teach. We had over 200 participants in it. We also brought subject matter experts from state and federal organizations to give talks and give a lot of insight on how people can get prepared, how to build their emergency kits, how to get their families ready. Another big program that we have in conjunction with Oak Harbor is the Community Emergency Response Team. We have usually about 2 classes per year in the city of Oak Harbor. And what this does is it gets families ready, or not just families, but individuals, families, and neighborhoods ready to respond to an emergency and disaster. It's a 20-hour class plus a full-scale exercise following it. We've been teaching it over at the Oak Harbor Training Facility for the last probably 12 years. Like I say, we do about 2 classes a year. We have anywhere between 15 to 40 people participating in each class. We have a lot of other programs that we sponsor with volunteers along with Oak Harbor. We talked about the Community Emergency Response Team. We also do what's called Map Your Neighborhood. So, like I said, we do a lot of individual preparedness, but we know that in a disaster, we're going to be relying on our neighbors as well. So we have a program called Map Your Neighborhood that has the neighbors helping neighbors. So what it does is not just individual preparedness, but it gets the neighbors to learn how to work as a team, how to coordinate, how to get their neighborhood kits together, how to communicate, and how to help each other. Because we know if we have a major disaster, such as either a Cascadia or a southern Whidbey Island earthquake, people are going to be on their own for quite a while. So knowing that they can rely on their neighbors, it's not only going to help the individuals and the families that are a little bit stronger, but it's also going to help our vulnerable communities to be able to make it through. We have our amateur radio group that we do several tests per month with that. One of the stations that we've set up is in the city of Oak Harbor, the Oak Harbor Fire Department. They, like I say, do their test every week to make sure they can keep the communications going. And this way we know that wherever somebody is, if all the power's down, all the cell phones are down, if nothing else is working, we know that amateur radio is going to be able to make communication, keep everybody communicated. Another thing that we do is our tests through AlertSense. We have an emergency alert system that we utilize. We test that weekly, as well as every year we do the big monthly test with that. So this is the Emergency Operations Center. It's upstairs at the fire station. I wish we had a picture of this before we actually made all the changes, because it was really a big storage area. I'm not sure if people visited before that. But when I first took the job 13 years ago, we got together and we tried to figure out how we could best not just operate during an emergency, but how we can collaborate and coordinate our operations. And we decided the best way to really keep in touch during a disaster is to have a joint operations center. So what we do is we move a lot of the boxes out of there. There's actually 2 rooms to this. So we cleared it out, and with Island County funds, we bought all the furniture and whiteboards and files and things like that for it. We got a lot of reference material, bookshelves and stuff in the other area that we use for a joint information center. And we made it, using FEMA standards, into an emergency operations center that we could all use. We know that in a disaster, municipalities are still responsible for their continuity of government. So everybody's going to be overwhelmed. We're all going to be short-staffed. So by having a joint operations center, we're not putting the burden on each municipality to fill a lot of those seats up to operate an operations center. Just like it describes up there, the Emergency Operations Center is really where everything is coordinated. Unlike the Incident Command System, so a lot of the fire jurisdictions, law enforcement, they're used to operating under the incident command system. And incident command system is really boots on the ground, tactical information. So if there's a fire, you set up incident command, and they operate that particular area. The Emergency Operations Center is where, what I like to say, do the 3 C's. That's where you communicate, you coordinate, and collaborate. And that's really what it's based off of. When we can use COVID as an example, when we set up the Emergency Operations Center for COVID, we coordinated all resources and logistics for COVID. So that means we got all the different ultra-cold freezers, all the freezers, generators, made sure all the different centers were operational. If we couldn't get equipment locally, we reached out to the state or federal government. So with the hospital, we were able to get respirators, we were able to get beds. And then, of course, for all the different organizations and businesses and long-term care facilities for city staff, we were able to bring personal protective equipment in, bring it in, organize it, and deliver it out to all the different agencies and organizations. During COVID alone, the Emergency Operations Center coordinated the acquisition and distribution of over 2.5 million pieces of PPE. Whoa. So this is the basic structure for the Emergency Operations Center. I know it's only got 10 boxes up there. That's the basic structure up there. When we do a full operating Emergency Operations Center, we can have up to 75 people. So under logistics alone, we would have probably close to 30 people manning shelters, points of distribution, different resource supply depots, things like that. So the biggest advantage of having the joint Emergency Operations Center, number one, it's just the collaboration. It's keeping that communication going. It's situational awareness. You can't know how to operate until you know what the situation is. It's like we say in the emergency management, you got to know how big is big and how bad is bad. So one of the biggest things we do in the EOC is coordinate our resources. We want to make sure that everybody's got everything that they can do to operate. So like I said, Incident Command does boots in the ground. The Emergency Operations Center makes sure that all those incident commands are able to operate and that they have everything they need. If we can't get it locally or regionally, that's when we start reaching out to the state or the federal government in order to bring resources in. Of course, the priority is always going to be save lives and save property. So when we operate, that's the primary thing that we're focusing on. And then, of course, emergencies, the response phase can be relatively short-lived. Recovery operations, which we'll see in another slide, can last days, weeks, even months or years. So one of the things that we're trying to really organize, not just for the community, but also for our staff, is training. So we will really want to get a good, comprehensive training program for emergency operations centers. One of the things that we're planning on in 2024, maybe into 2025, depending on the schedule of our senior leadership, is another senior officials workshop for all hazards preparedness. We want to bring that in. Hopefully we can bring it in around October if things work out. But if we have that, then what we're going to try to bring in is going to be intermediate emergency operations center course. Emergency operations center has kind of evolved since earlier times. Really, they used to follow what they call the incident command system structure. And they realized, particularly with COVID and with some of the bigger events that happen, is that you really need a specialized structure to provide that support into an emergency operations center. So they went to skill sets. So what we're doing in 2024, 2025 is to do skill set training for each one of the emergency operations center positions. That way everybody coming in, they know exactly what to do. We don't have to rely on just-in-time training when people come in to support the emergency operations center. Along with that, we're developing, as part of our credentialing program, the position-specific task books. So we know that if somebody's attending the training, they get qualified in each particular position. So if somebody comes in, we know what they're qualified to work in. And then we do our typical training that we always do. We have what we call a REACT team, and that does a lot of acts of violence training. We just did one the other day, a coordinated class. Amongst the attendees of that were people that organize the music festival. So we make sure that if something happens, they know how to respond. Sheltering operations is a big one. We have a lot of designated shelters around, so what we want to do is to make sure that if we open up that shelter, people are trained, as well as public information and joint information center training. So we want to bring that in here, make sure that if we do have a particular event, that all of our municipalities and all of Island County are all trained to operate as PIOs, all able to operate in a joint information center or a joint information system. And then eventually what we want to go to is we want to get FEMA involved in there. FEMA's got a national exercise program. So once we get all of our staff and all of our volunteers and everybody that's going to be working there, that base training, we want to get a consolidated exercise program going. It'll be a 4-year cycle, progressively more difficult exercises. So we know that not only do you have the training, but you know how to operate in a more stressful type environment. And like we said, you know, response, something like a fire, something like that, recovery might be very short period of time. The incident happens, you have a response phase where we save lives, we save our property, but that recovery phase can be a lot longer. Even something like a winter storm or flooding, the marina getting damaged, those can go on for days, for months, and the longer that recovery occurs, the more economically we're suffering, the more people are suffering. So we want to get that recovery period to a little bit shorter than what it normally would if we weren't prepared. So one of the other things that benefits us with our partnership is we have a lot of shared equipment. So not only do we have the Emergency Operations Center, but we have a lot of portable shelters that we utilize. We call them the DMX shelters. So if we have to set something up in order to inspect buildings, in order to set up a temporary work area, then we can set those up. We also have water purification systems that we can set up. We have all kinds of communications gear, emergency communications. We have a lot of equipment that we use for setting up community points of distribution. We have trailers that are ready to go, so if we do get food, supplies, water, and stuff in, we can set it up in any particular area. And then we also have a command trailer. I know for just about every Oak Harbor event, Oak Harbor PD, fire, they utilize our command trailer, so they have a place that they can operate out of. So another thing that we do is we coordinate all of our different volunteers. So we have over 700 volunteers that are registered with Island County. One thing about our volunteers is we make sure that all of them are registered as emergency workers. If you're not familiar with the emergency worker program for Washington State, when they get registered, they get all the proper paperwork completed, then they are covered door to door for any kind of injury, damage, liability. So like all of our volunteers for COVID, they're all registered workers. If anything happened to them from the time they left their home to the time they return their home, they're covered. So that takes that liability off of the city, takes it off the county that's they're registered. Some other things that we've utilized grant funding for the city of Oak Harbor to benefit both would be the AHAB siren. We have an all hazards alert broadcasting siren at the marina for tsunami. We know that the marina is in a tsunami hazard inundation area. So we utilize grant funding in order to get an AHAB siren there. Also for hazardous material spills, we have a hazmat response trailer that's parked over there as well. So like I said, we've been partnering with the city of Oak Harbor for well over 12, it'll be coming on 13 years since I took this position here. I can't say enough about how valuable it is just being able to have the subject matter experts and to be able to have that collaboration. I think it makes both the city and the county much stronger just having that partnership. With that, any questions?
Thank you, Eric. I will turn it over to council for questions or comments at this time. Councilmember Stuckey.
Have you approached the new owner of the airport? Is there any talks of having that on the plan? Just
I
curious.
did. So we were working with the old airport for quite a while, and it was in quite the disarray. So we talked to him the other day, and he's excited to participate. He's got some things that he wants to do, such as widening the runway and making some other improvements, but he's very excited about being a part of our emergency plans. We do an aviation exercise every year. We utilize the Oak Harbor Airport. We utilize the one on South Whidbey as well, and Coopville just started coming on board with that as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Stuckey. Anyone else? Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Eric. I appreciate the update. Yeah, sounds like there's been quite a few changes since the last time I was up there in the EOC. So I would encourage you to pass any learning opportunities our way, and let us know about if you're doing any training opportunities or anything like that. And also to my council members, I would encourage you to pursue training opportunities. The FEMA website has a ton of online classes you can take and get certified. Just do it at your own pace. And occasionally there's an in-person training. I've done the CERT training. It's fantastic. Definitely worth 3 days of your life. It's really great. And I'm pleased to hear that they've been so well attended. Like 15 to 40 people every time you do it?
Yeah, they've been very well attended. People are excited about it, and we try to make it fun, put them under a little stress, but not too much stress.
A little bit, not too much. Yeah, that's really good to hear. I'm pleased about that. So yeah, anything that if it comes across your desk and it looks informative or interesting, please pass that along to us so that we can always be educating ourselves.
Oh, certainly, yeah. So I'm working to provide a list of classes that are typically mandatory before going to some of the other classes. And then we'd also like to get big teams together from both the city and the county to go to Maryland and attend the classes over at the FEMA Academy. So it's a good deal. You pay for your airline ticket up front, but they reimburse you for it, and they take care of the accommodations, the food, everything. So it's a good deal.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Anyone else? Questions or comments? Yes, Councilmember Wittgenstein.
Yeah, thank you. Not as familiar as others with all this, and I think anything we're doing to ensure the safety of our citizens and community during events of any kind is wonderful. I'm really just curious as what kind of behavioral health aspect or involvement you have from not just the county. I know the county has their piece of it, but from the private counselors in the community that are here, are they being invited to the table, I should say?
You know, when we, during COVID, we had a lot of psychologists, psychiatrists that stepped up, and they provided comfort and aid during, they're one of our volunteers, our medical volunteers. So we have had quite a few step up.
Thank you, Councilmember Wittgenstein. Anyone else have any questions or comments? Hearing none, I will say thank you, Mr. Brooks. That was a good presentation. Thank you very much. Before we move on to our next section, we're going to recess for 5 minutes, please. Thank you. All right, we're back. We're all back. We're back in session. So with that, we'll move on to legal potential ordinance number 1995, addressing supervision of a minor. Not introducing, it will not be Hillary, it will be Chief Slowick with us today.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. Chief Slowick, Oak Harbor Police Department. We do have our City Attorney, Hillary Evans, remote. This is regarding the potential ordinance for number 1995, addressing supervision of a minor. Do we have slides? Yeah, okay. All right, so I'm just going to read from the packet. So last year, council inquired about whether to adopt a possible policy or ordinance making failure to supervise a minor a misdemeanor. The state has several such laws, including criminal mistreatment of a child, including criminal mistreatment of a child, which is an RCW, which the city's adopted into municipal code, leaving a child unattended in a vehicle, abandonment of a dependent person, which is also, those have also been adopted into a municipal code. Cities such as Pasco and Kennewick have adopted ordinances specifically related to a parent, custodian, or guardian's failure to supervise a minor or a child. Attached is a draft ordinance for your consideration, and it's based off the Pasco ordinance. Included in the packet is the Kennewick's version, which is a little bit shorter, which I will not be reading. So the ordinance that, the proposed ordinance, which is ordinance number 1995, is failure to supervise a minor, and it's failure to supervise a minor, which means it is unlawful for any parent, parents, or legal guardians, or any other person having the care or custody of a child under the age of 18 to fail to properly supervise and care for such minor, in that such failure or supervision or care contributes to the minor violating any law of the United States, the state of Washington, or any ordinance of the city of Oak Harbor or Island County. It is unlawful for any parent, parents, or legal guardians, or any other person having the care or custody of a minor under the age of 18 to failure to provide a home or settled place of abode, or failure to exercise proper parental control of such minor, or neglect, inflict cruelty, or depravity upon, or failure to provide a fit place for such minor to live, or allow such minor to frequent the company of reputed criminals, vagrants, or prostitutes, or allow such minor to live in the house of prostitution or assignation, or allow such minor to visit any saloon or place of spiritus, vinous, or malt liquors, or consumed or sold, bartered, or given away, or allow such minor to do activities beyond their control and power without seeking the assistance of appropriate state or local authorities, or allow such minor to lead an ideal, dissolute, or immoral life, or suffer such minor to be truant, or allow such minor to use unlawful drugs, narcotics, or other controlled substances, or grossly and willfully neglect any medical care necessary for the well-being of such minor. Allow a child 12 years of age or younger by leaving the child without an adult supervision for unreasonable periods of time, or leaving the child unattended under circumstances which create a risk of bodily harm to the child, or allow such minor to misuse the emergency 911 system. A violation of this section is a misdemeanor. That's the ordinance proposed. Any questions?
All right, thank you, Chief. With that, I'll turn it over to council for questions or comments. Yes, Councilmember Hoffmeyer.
Yeah, I remember back, I think it was in the last election cycle, when a member of Congress said, don't judge us by the laws that we pass into law, but the laws that we kill on arrival. So for me, the laws of the state of Washington are strict enough in almost all areas. Mm-hmm. So with a lot of ordinances and resolutions that with a lot of draft language that we see, I see room for improvement. On this one, I have the feeling of kill on sight. I don't like it. I don't know where everybody else is, though. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hoffmeyer. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. There's some interesting language here in our agenda packet that I just want to clarify. I'm the one that asked to have this discussion, and I brought it up on behalf of a citizen that came to me and said, hey, could we, if we wanted to do this, how would we do it? And I said, well, you would ask City Council to put it on the agenda for discussion. And that's all I wanted to do is have a conversation. I'd never heard of a ordinance similar to this. So I wanted, well, what is it? Is it legal? Mostly, does Oak Harbor have a need for it from the policing perspective? I was curious to find out from the OHPD if there was a need for an ordinance like this or a benefit from having an ordinance like this. That would be the place I would want to start, is from a policing perspective. Do you see it, is there a rash of unsupervised children running around? Is this something that even needs to be addressed? And, you know, if so, why? And if not, why not?
Yeah, I'll say from the police department standpoint, I could see where this ordinance could potentially be used maybe 1 or 2 times during the year. A lot of times we have other city ordinances, or we adopt RCWs, or we have the RCW that we can use that covers a lot of the abandonment, mistreatment, and neglect issues. So some of the things we get into when we talk about juveniles 18 years and younger that are going out and creating crime, when the parent knows about that crime, right now there's no tool, or there is no ordinance or RCW that could be leveraged to have them intervene. This potentially is a tool that could be used, or an ordinance that could be used. An example of that is we've had a rash of vehicle thefts in Island County and in Oak Harbor in the year. And as of last Thursday, we were at 21 vehicles stolen in Oak Harbor, the city limits, 35 in Island County. And we know that a majority of those are 12 and 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds doing this that are under the age. State law precludes us from being able to pursue in these situations if we see the stolen vehicle. The reason we know that these youth are involved are because of either surveillance video that we find or see, or we have witnesses that observe the kids, or recently we had somebody that just got arrested in Snohomish County with one of our stolen vehicles that is a minor for DUI and then eluding the police. So this is a tool. In those situations, those parents are well aware that their kids are out doing these things.
Gotcha. So the thinking is that if the parents are also getting in trouble for the things that their children are getting in trouble for, then they may be more motivated to supervise?
I mean, it is a failing to supervise if you know that you're allowing your child to go out and they're committing crime and not doing things to not, to maybe restrict them. Easily, you can't lock your child in your residence, but you can report, hey, they left the house again and I think they're out committing crime. You report it.
Well, yeah, if your 12-year-old comes home with a car, I mean, yeah, that's pretty hard to stash under the bed. But in your experience, with the exception of that example, in your experience, this is something that would, you said, be applied maybe once or twice a year?
I think the reason, my understanding that one of the items of where this started from was we knew that we had youth that were going out and doing graffiti. The parents knew the youth was going out and buying spray cans and those type of things, and there was no intervention being done. So this was something that was brought forward.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that does sound like something I would be interested in discussing. Oh, no, I'll wait and hear from the rest of my council people. Oh, sorry, there was one more. In terms of the example ordinance, for the record, I have absolutely no interest in a city council legislating things such as being idle or immoral. That's not up to us. But it would be interesting to see if there's a way to hold parents responsible like in the graffiti example and stuff, is there, sorry, I know I said I was done, but is there another option for holding parents responsible?
I probably would refer to Hillary if,
Yeah.
I don't know if she's, it looks like she's still on the
Oh,
call.
there she is. Hi, Hillary.
Hi. I think this might be our best option. It is awfully hard to prosecute someone for a crime they didn't themselves commit. So, you know, the vicarious liability for graffiti is difficult. I think this is your best and only way to hold parents accountable that I can think of.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm really done.
All right, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And yes, Councilmember Arms.
One of the things it said, unreasonable period of time, that's kind of vague. I mean, you know, what's unreasonable, 2 hours, 3 hours? I guess from a parent standpoint, back in the day, we really didn't have anybody to take care of the kid. You had to go to work, you had to do all that, so your neighbors don't like you, they rat you out, then you're in trouble. And that's what I'm kind of afraid of. I understand about the graffiti and the stolen car, but even when you try to do anything about it, the child is the child, other than calling the police on your child and having them locked up. I mean, that's, and I just don't see how we can make people responsible if they're not going to be responsible. Even when you try, the child does what the child wants. I mean, I've had that experience, and it doesn't matter what you do, they're going to do whatever, and you're still stuck. And then to punish you, even though you've tried, is, for me, kind of harsh. That's how I feel.
Thank you, Councilmember Arms. Councilmember Wittgenstein.
I'm gonna crack my knuckles. Way too vague. There's too many ambiguous, I think is the word I'm thinking about. In this whole thing, I was that child. No, I'm not anymore. Well, maybe a little bit. I really was that child that my parents, if I went out and I didn't care if my parents tried to stop me from doing stuff. That was me now. Hindsight at 50 years old or older, I know that probably wasn't the best action at the time now. But from where I was at that point in time, I wasn't even going to entertain listening to anybody, and I did get to know the police force at that point in time. And even my parents getting in trouble wouldn't have dissuaded me at that point. So the population we're trying to target, this is a hindrance to helping these families, not a pathway to helping them. And I think that's how we need to kind of look at it. I think if our state laws are adequate enough to cover the majority of what we're always doing, I don't think we need to over-govern our constituents in our community. I think we can come up with better ways, and I think we as a community need to be tasked to find ways to do that. And I'd be more than happy to, help brainstorm if we could to come up with some ideas in order to help address these families and whatnot. Part of this, I think, comes down to the relationships our law enforcement has with the community. If a parent's unwilling to report on their child because of their own personal relationships with the law enforcement, maybe it's not our department, maybe it's passed somewhere else, that's something we can address. So that comes back to this community engagement that we want to do with our community to build and strengthen these relationships so that we can best support the law enforcement. If a parent knows that, like, hey, I'm gonna call, my son just snuck out of the house, he's out running around, or they are out running around with spray cans, it's a two-way situation for the parent, because if they're trying their best, and I am coming from a professional look at this, right? Like, if that parent is trying their best to connect with that child, to get them to make good choices versus poor choices, and they have to call and turn their kid in, they may jeopardize the little bit of work they'd already done to that point, right? And so that's a conundrum. And then here's a fine on that, because the majority of these kids are probably from lower socioeconomic classes, I would imagine. I know there's always an outlier layer of the rich kid going in and middle class kid, just being defiant. But a lot of these are kids that grew up with parents that are working 2 and 3 jobs and don't have that supervision, so they end up kind of making poor choices and suffering consequences. And to hurt a family that's already struggling with that is not something I'm in favor of. And then how do we define proper parental control? That's a good question. I would love to, if we can, figure that one out, I'd be curious on what that looks like, because that's like, oh, what you think is proper parent control, I might think is excessive, right? What he thinks is proper parent control, I might think, not at all, right? It all depends, right? It could be that very, that's an ambiguity, right? And then my other question was like, I got two others. For one, this is redundant, I believe, that I've said. It sounds like we have two other cities in the state of 280 cities that are actually coming up with their own to kind of put this into place. That's the examples we've been given, is two cities that are side by side, mind you, just down the road from Yakima. And if anybody knows about Yakima, I do. So I'm curious as how many other cities in our community are actually trying to, strengthen and tighten up these laws in that regard. It just seems a little excessive. So, in this draft form, yeah, I'm with Councilmember Hoffmeyer, dead on arrival. That's all I got.
Thank you, Councilmember Wittgenstein. Councilmember Stuckey.
Nothing too much more to add, but I know the point of these workshops is to kind of give feedback on where we want to go. I think it's pretty clear. While I'm all for cutting down on general hooliganism, this is too vague. I don't think that needs to go any farther than here. So appreciate your time.
Thank you, Councilmember Stuckey. Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. I too can't support it the way that it's written. Unfortunately, the first one, failure to provide a home. In the 26 years I've been coaching, unfortunately, I come across occasionally a child that is experiencing homelessness. I would hate to punish the parent for the situation that they're in, and certainly don't want to take the kid if that's where they choose to be. And then it seems to punish, the working class parent or the single parent whose child has to be home, unfortunately for a few hours after school by themselves. And so I had the same question as Council Member Wittgenstein in terms of 281 cities or 280 cities, and we only have two examples. It just seems like the state has covered this in most cases. If there's a way that we could address parents who are knowingly disregarding the law or knowingly allowing their child to break the law, that's one thing. But to say, it's illegal for you to not be able to supervise your child, I think is going just too far for what we do here. So.
Thank you, Councilmember Marshall. Councilmember Wiesner, you have a question or comment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yes, Chief, all in favor of providing you the tools that you need to be able to, keep our community safe, but a lot wrong with, what we've got in front of us. I think there was even a reference in there about taking children into places where liquor and alcohol are sold, where that's most restaurants. It seems as though, we'd be creating an ordinance to solve a minor problem that I think could create a whole big can of worms with the existing wording and the vagueness. Councilmember Marshall really stole the words out of my mouth. That if you need an ordinance that allows you to prosecute parents who enable their children to knowingly break the law, I think we could do that ordinance with a lot less language and a lot more clarity and a lot more teeth. Right now, of course, the ordinance you have in front of you, the burden of proof of what a parent knew or doesn't know, right, falls into that. And as we all know, that's a real tough job for law enforcement, proving what somebody knew versus what they don't know, and being able to have that stand up in court, right? So, I would certainly support the concept behind giving you the teeth you need if there's, some sort of an enabling ordinance. I would like to think it, aiding and abetting, if somebody were to go out and intentionally buy spray paint to give to a child to go out in the town and take buildings and do that knowingly, I would like to think aiding and abetting would fall into that. But, if we don't have the language that's appropriate to allow you to enforce that, then certainly let's look at that. But yeah, there's just a lot here that I can't support. But thanks for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Councilmember Wiesner. I think we've now heard from everyone. Anything else on this subject before we move on?
Mayor, can I just add one thing?
Absolutely.
Sure. This is not brought forward by the police department. I just want to make clear about this. Yeah, so just to clear this up, I am speaking on behalf of city admin and legal. So presenting this. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's also not my idea, nor am I advocating for it necessarily.
This was.
Thank you, Hillary. All right, anything, oh yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Sorry, just wrap it up. No, thank you for putting the time into digging up an example of one of these ordinances so that we could have the requested discussion. I think that we've had said discussion, and none of us seem particularly thrilled about passing an ordinance like this such as written, but you know, it might be worth doing some brainstorming to see if we could maybe use some positive reinforcement when it comes to parents instead of, you know, punishing families that are already struggling. So thank you for everyone's time and feedback. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. With that, we will close this subject and move on to within legal, code of conduct, council ethics policy. Introducing this topic is Deputy City Administrator Sabrina Combs, as well as our City Attorney Hillary Evans.
Okay, so next item. During the 2024 retreat we recently had with you, one of the items that came up was the Code of Ethics. So we did put that together, put it in the packet as a draft. And what we're just requesting today is to have you as council, after you've reviewed that, give us some comments. And if you have any of those comments today, we just want to make sure that we have all of the items added that you would be requesting for editing that document. And I have Kim Perrine standing by, and she is taking careful notes like she did with the bylaws. So that's where we're at.
All right, thank you. And with that, I will turn it over to council for comments or questions on this subject. Yes, Councilmember Hoffmeyer.
Yeah, I like a lot of what's in there. I do still feel the way I felt a year ago that the state laws are enough, but I do like what you have put together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hoffmeyer. Councilmember Wittgenstein.
I think it's good. I'm in support of this. I think as a professional who works with professional ethics beyond our state laws and beyond our stuff, I think it's prudent for us to have something that we all agree upon that's up here that can we can hold each other accountable to. So, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Wittgenstein. Councilmember Stuckey.
Yeah, when this came up like a year and a half ago, I think,
Yeah.
I kind of leaned like Councilmember Hoffmeyer of we have the laws on the books and everything. That being said, one thing I do like is it does take, I particularly like the last page of sanctions. It takes kind of the ambiguity. It would have been helpful in situations we had experienced in recent memory. So do I think it's 100% necessary? No. But do I think there's anything harm in having it? Not at all. I think it's good to have that reminder. And I like seeing a bit of a process so we're not at the moment saying, what do we do? So I kind of turned a little bit from last year, and I'm okay with it. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Appreciate the feedback.
Thank you, Councilmember Stuckey. Anyone else? Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. I like it too. I don't have any objections to it. Anytime we can add some formality to what it is that we do is good. It is a little repetitive in terms of what we already have to abide by state law and stuff. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with doubling down, really. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Marshall. Anyone else have anything for the good of the order? Okay, well, with that, we'll close that subject.
So just to let everybody know, sorry, Mayor.
Oh, yep, you're fine.
Just to let everybody know, we'll be bringing this back on March 5th with the resolution so that it's formalized.
Thank you, Sabrina. All right, we're going to move into the police department where we get to hear from Chief Slowick again on police department staffing and funding. Here's the ask.
Oh, my turn. No, just joking. All right, good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. Tony Slowick, Chief of Police. So I am presenting a police department staffing update. On October 2023, City Council approved the 29th commission officer position funded in 2024. At that time, City Council asked for what were the future staffing needs of the police department. So with that, created a scope of work of determining how to evaluate staffing and in our operations. So looked at current and future staffing and operation needs of the police department to ensure effective and efficient use of police department personnel and financial resources that are consistent with best practices. Identify key approaches to law enforcement services delivered, modified, and to contribute to enhanced efficiencies and effectiveness to serve and improve the quality and safety of our community. So those are the things we're looking at. The methodology I used, or that was used, was looking at our radio logs, looking at our calls for service, looking at our community requests for the last 2 years. We looked at all our data that we had in timekeeping and scheduling. We looked at best practices that were put out by Department of Justice, International Association of Chief of Police, International City Council, or City and County Management Association, and Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs. So as we look at some of the information, this is our total calls for service. We had a high peak in 2022, and our 2023 numbers were a little bit lower. However, just calls for service is not a good snapshot of how busy are our officers. We look at what are our arrests, misdemeanor arrests, felony arrests, criminal traffic, and infractions, and we are trending upward for the last couple years. That is, we had a sag in 2022, and that was due to some staffing concerns that we had. So some lower numbers there, but that was just because we were at minimum staffing in 2022. When we look at community characteristics of our top 10 calls handling times, this is a snapshot of that. When we talk about handling times, that's looking at assigning of the call, the response to the call, and being on scene. So a total of, so in 2023, we had 12,368 calls. On average, that's about 47.2 minutes on a call. Some of those calls are multiple officers on a call. We looked at the call volume over the year and where we are at for when is our calls coming in throughout the day. So we know that most of our call volume is that 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. or that 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. time frame. And then some other information that we looked at is some historical staffing levels. So we know from 1997 to 2002, we had 30 officers at the Oak Harbor Police Department. That's 30 commissioned officers. We lost those officers in 2003. And then we pinballed a little bit between 26 and 28 officers until about 2020. Currently, up from 2008 to 2023, we had a minimum staffing of 2 officers during daytime from 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. and 3 officers nighttime from 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. A lot of times we leveraged specialty positions, detectives, admin staff, to cover in the daytime those extra staffing needs that we needed, or we filled that by overtime. In 2024, when I took this position, I changed our coverage time and reduced that 2-hour period down to 3 a.m. to 8 a.m. Our goal is to have 3-hour officers on all the time. So a couple other things that are unique to the city that we have some changes to. One is our public disclosure requests. So between 2021 and 2023, we've had a 109% increase in public disclosure requests, which puts a greater demand on our non-commissioned staff, which supports our commissioned staff. Additionally, we've seen an increase in drug task force and drug activity, and this is just for 2024. There's some information there. I think that the unique thing for the drug stuff is the SCADU, which is our Skagit County Interagency Drug Task Force. They operate, and we support them in funding, but they operate in Island County. They provide services to the Oak Harbor Police Department, but a lot of times the interdiction that's done in Skagit County, we know that the same dealers are dealing in Island County. You know, that those things don't, the suspects or the drugs don't stop at the county line. So you can see in the February one, there was a very significant drug bust that Skidoo had, where they had 4 pounds of fentanyl powder was seized, and per the DEA, that could kill 1 million people. So that amount of powder. So some of the staffing models that we looked at. So per capita model is probably what most people are used to, but the other part is the best practices model is the proactive time model. So we looked at both of those models. So per capita model, the advantages are really, it's simple to calculate, ease of interpretation. Disadvantages are it fails to address how the officers spend their time, fails to measure quality and effort of work, does not account for community needs. Oak Harbor is unique since we look at per capita. The Oak Harbor Police Department responds to all domestic violence and is the primary investigative agency for all domestic violence on the Navy housing. We also assist with other calls for service in Navy housing. And so if you looked at just per capita model, we would not account for that those Navy housing numbers. And it fails to address unfunded legislative mandates, sort of like for training, EVOC, those type of things. So per the per capita staffing model, I looked at comparable cities. So when we look at Burlington, Anacortes, Mount Vernon, Mukilteo, Mount Lake Terrace, and Oak Harbor, these are all comparable cities per our contract that we use for collective bargaining. Oak Harbor would be at a 1.17 officer per 1,000 per capita model. When you look at Anacortes, they're at a 1.64, or Burlington's a 3.05. Now, Burlington does have a big influx of people during the daytime because of the business community, and that's why you see that. But the average for the state is 1.4 officers per 1,000. The average nationally is 2.31. So the proactive time model, this is the one that is recommended by best practices, recommended by all those associations, and is the one that I truly believe that we should be looking at. Measures the amount of free time an officer has outside of responding to calls for service, performing all required administrative tasks. Some of those things could include report writing, evidence processing, following up on investigations, shift breaks per collective bargaining agreements, shift briefings as part of training and staffing requirements, meal breaks part of collective bargaining agreements, and on-duty court and training needs. In the proactive time model, it's recommended that, that the agency try to keep the range of free time for officers around 40%, or in a 12-hour shift, that's about 5 hours. So that 5 hours is spent being able to engage with the community, provide presentations, respond to schools and do interactions, go and do a lot of other things, ride downtown and be on our bicycles that you see us do during the summer, walk in on all our businesses and make sure that everybody's safe, go and engage with our unhoused population and people at Spin Cafe, making sure that we have the time that we can spend on crisis calls or getting people connected with services, that it's not just responding, 2 or 3 officers to a call. So in this proactive time model, we went and looked at our net available hours in 2023. So this is the number of hours that we had patrol officers doing patrol functions. That number was 26,102. Our patrol workload, which is the amount of time that we were able to gather on how much time officers were working or occupied, not doing proactive policing activities, but on calls for service, response to calls, investigations, report writing. You can see it there. And when we do the math, our overall proactive level is 24.6% available. Now, this isn't 100% accurate. We know that there's a variation in this. The tool that we use to gather this time is radio logs and the officers calling out at the police department or calling on tasks. That's right now the tool that we have to gather this information. But it's fairly consistent across the board as we look at all the squads. No? That's not the right button. So when we look at the proactive time model, the overall time for patrol officers is the lowest we have seen, and this is due to, so it's the lowest we've seen because of officers having to respond to calls for service where you need 2 and 3 officers. This is mental health calls. This is a lot of those 911 calls that turn into behavioral health calls where no one's arrested, but we get somebody engaged in services. It's us staying on scene with juveniles where CPS is, it takes them, 8 hours to respond, or it's us staying at a crisis location or having to go down to the hospital with people in need. So in those times, we pull specialized staff. It could be myself as the chief working the road, detective, school resource officer, or our special PROACT team to cover the shifts. Due to increased calls for service, a lot of times, like I said, is 2 to 3 officers to de-escalate scenes or investigate. Over the last 2 years, there's been significant increase in non-criminal calls dealing with mental health, substance abuse, and intervention services. And we have a lot of unfunded training requirements since 2021 in legislative changes. And those are de-escalation, use of force, bias training, EVOC training, active shooter training. Why are they so laborsome for us? A lot of times we don't have the instructor. The instructor might be in Skagit County, Snohomish County, or Whatcom County. It's that time of sending officers to Whatcom County to go do a 6-hour EVOC course, and then they have travel time back and forth, and then we got to rotate everybody through on mandatory requirements. So what are we asking for? So to improve proactive time, we're asking to increase our patrol staffing by 4 officers. We believe that'll increase our proactive time and provide more availability of officers to the community. We're asking to increase one officer, an additional officer for a drug detective, and we would assign that person to the drug task force working in Island County. So they would be part of that team, but working out of Oak Harbor. Modify our patrol schedules, which don't cost us anything, but making sure we're leveraging that. As I'm hiring my command staff, I'm looking at reorganizing my second captain position and absorbing one of my sergeant positions into 2 operational lieutenants so that we have better coverage of our operational needs and command staff. And then the other part is support services, because we have so much public disclosure and additional needs, asking for a half-time records receptionist. This is what that staffing looks like. So everybody in blue would be new hires. And when we talk about funding, as we heard in our City Council retreat, there are short-term funding and there's long-term funding. We're always looking for those long-term funding needs, and that will be provided during March City Council by Dave Goldman. Our short-term funding that we know of is that we'll have Department of Justice COPS hiring grants. We can apply for those grants, and my intent is to apply for those grants. Additionally, for that drug detective, we know that we're getting $1.2 million from a Johnson & Johnson settlement that should be going in front of City Council to sign that agreement in the next month or 2. And that is a lump sum payout that we should receive in May, and that could fund that position for 8 years. So that's one example. With the opioid settlement that we are getting, there are 5 other settlements coming as well. So with that, I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief Slowick. Council questions, comments? Yes, Councilmember Hoffmeyer.
Thank you. I support it 100%. Thanks.
Yes, Councilmember Stuckey.
It's a decent amount of asks. Honestly, is this asking for all this but settle for a little bit less? I mean, is this what you need? I mean,
Yeah.
if half of it was approved, would that still be of help?
Sure, I think any officers would be helpful. I'll let you know that the intent is to put 1 officer on each squad. I need 4 officers for us to feel 1 officer on the street full-time. So really, for us to feel that impact is 4 officers equals 1 officer on the street. And that's because we work 24 hours a day. It's shift work. We need an extra body on each squad, and we have 4 patrol squads.
I'm glad you pointed out, because it wasn't in the slide deck. When you got to the proactive time modeling, I was looking at what considers proactive time. It's all important. To me, proactive time, I'd like to see more towards the community policing. I mean, for example, in my business, I admit I'm kind of on the outskirts. I can understand not having an officer there now, but prior to me being on council, I never had an officer just stop by and see how things were doing. Now, that's partly because I'm pioneer and I understand that, but it would be great for folks first time to get to meet a police officer for a reason other than needing them.
Yeah.
You know, it kind of takes the shock of police. You're great guys, you know, and gals. Is there any thought on reopening the reserve officer program?
We have had discussions over the last few years. It's a high liability program, reserve officers. The level of training and commitment is labor intensive, and I think with the unfunded training mandates, it would be very difficult if we did not have a dedicated person managing that program all the time and being able to provide that. So I don't think with the staffing we have, we could, and even this staffing proposed, I don't believe we could start the reserve officer program. I believe what we could do is expand our volunteer program more. I believe we could do more citizens academies and more in community engagements and community policing. I think the reserve program would be challenging. I think I'd have to look at that a little more, but there is a high liability and that training aspect, because a reserve officer has to be trained to the same level annually, which is 24 hours of in-service training minimum, that a commissioned officer has.
Sure. I understand liability, certainly. I mean, I definitely think that might be something worth looking more at. I mean, I would imagine some of that liability can be mitigated by, you're talking about calls that require 2 or 3 officers. You know, I know that there's some departments when I was trying to become police officer that they have their more experienced reserve officers basically have all the same duties. They're in a squad car, they're by themselves. But in some of those cases where you need 2 or 3 officers, if you kind of had a buddy system, so to speak, would that reduce some of that liability, considering there's a trained full-time officer there and the other person's there more of a backup situation, not the primary person responding to a call?
Yeah, so if the reserve officer was able to achieve a certain level where they had independence, it could be beneficial. And I'll say with Island County, they have a reserve program that has run for a long time, and they have a handful of reservists that they operate and they leverage as support staff for them or support officers. I would have to get a little more thought into and look into what that would take to get that off the ground.
Just something I'd, like more consideration. And for me, I'm kind of for this. I'm cautiously for it. Obviously, long-term funding is always a concern. Yeah. I would just want to make sure that time that those officers have is spent. Like I said, community policing is something I'd like to see more focus to. And obviously, your officers are taxed right now, and I understand that. So how much more time do they have? I mean, I've done 1 or 2 ride-alongs. I didn't see a whole lot of activity during those ride-alongs. I could have just caught it on off time.
Sure.
So cautiously for, but definitely need more information.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember Stuckey. Any other questions or comments from council? Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Chaz, I'm going to put you on the spot. I don't know if you have access to a device there. Our overall city budget, what percentage of that goes to law enforcement? Is it like 60% or something? I'm trying to remember. It's a big chunk. I don't know if you have that kind of thing at your fingertips.
Well, I can definitely look it up and get that to you, because it's not at the top of my head.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, from a practical standpoint, understand everything that you're requesting, and it makes a whole lot of sense, and it would be great. From an implementation standpoint, how are we going to pay for it?
Certainly.
Where is that going to come from? And so I would definitely like to have some more information, different funding options, etc. But I appreciate the level of detail that you went into. It's helpful to understand exactly what the benefit would be of adding staff and how that would improve things. So, really comprehensive ask. I appreciate that. But yeah, all my questions are basically financial. So I don't know if you want to come back with the official ask or the budget item or.
I believe David Goldman's going to do a presentation in March on finance for what this could look like. And then after that, I would come back for the official ask.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Anyone else with questions or comments? Yes, Councilmember Wittgenstein.
Thank you, Chief Slowick. I think about this comprehensive plan and this growth that we're going to be going on in this community. It's not going to slow down. It's not going to stop. It's continuing to happen. And all of our services, including the fire district and supporting our other municipalities within the north end of the island and south, really island wide, our hospital system, all of this stuff needs a lot of help and a lot of and grow with the growth, to grow with the growth. Yep. And so I too am in favor of asking if we can financially swing it. I'm absolutely on board with the long-term plans to grow and be supportive throughout this thing. It really excites me to see the drug detective on that list. I think that's something we need in-house as well as on the north end. I appreciate Skagit doing all they do for us, and you're right, drug dealers, they don't just stay in their own county. They go wherever the profits are, I guess, or the clientele. And it's an epidemic that we've been dealing with for a lot of years, and it's just going to continue. And so whatever we can do to help support that. The funding is going to be the big piece, right? How do we pay for it? And more community involvement, as I've been saying all along. I think the more we're BSing with the officers in town, walking around and seeing them, the better. Yep. And so I love the model that you presented that's shared with that. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Wittgenstein. Councilmember Stuckey.
Yeah, one more thought. Whenever we see, and they're always a little different, but whenever we see reports of safest cities in Washington, Oak Harbor's typically in the top 10, which is a wonderful thing. I mean, that's what we want. But it is definitely a consideration we're asking for. I mean, we're already one of the safest cities. A friend of mine told me with the military, we kind of have a lot of citizens that are in some ways pre-screened to be good citizens in a way with the military, right? So that may have something to do with that great rating. So also a consideration for us as we do this, we're already in the top 10. Now, we don't want to drop. I get that. But that's also a consideration when asking for this big of an ask. So just a thought.
Thank you, Councilmember Stuckey. So I would just like to add, when we met last, one of the things I asked you about were these service calls, would break down how many are military and how many are just regular civilians. If you could get that detail for us, yes, because that goes to his point, and I just want to prove something with that. All right, any other questions or comments? Yes, Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. So actually that does raise a question for me. You mentioned that we are handling all the domestic for the military. Mm-hmm. Is there any option or opportunity for them to fund or help to fund a position? I mean, because we are essentially handling that aspect of it. And, the ride along I did when I first got on council, we had all three officers tied up in one call. And so that is, for me, that was concerning, right? Is we've got all our resources at one location, and if something were to happen somewhere else, that's obviously problematic. I don't disagree that we need more officers, but like my fellow council members, funding is going to be the big question for me. Is how do we make this work without being a detriment to our citizens, because that's ultimately who we're trying to protect. And so I look forward to hearing more information about this and see how we can make it happen. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Marshall. Anyone else for the good of the order? All right, with that, we'll close this subject. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
And we will invite up our Deputy City Administrator, Sabrina Combs, to deliver the monthly department report.
So the report is included in your packet. Basically, what we're doing is just refining that report and turning it from a city administrator's report into a monthly department report, which is what it is. It's providing you with the data from the various departments within the city. So if you have any suggestions or comments for that, let myself or Mikhail Finkel know, and we will make sure to take that under advisement.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I have several questions. And if you can't answer them today, that is fine. Let's see. On the electronic payments, let's see, I'm on page like 163, I think. Yeah, 163. The totals, there's a section for electronic payments, and then there's a section for e-payment center, and then there's a section for paying your utility bill online. What are the differences between those three? And the numbers for each of those categories is different.
Are you talking about the Google Analytics for the website?
Yes, sorry.
Yes, sorry, I just want to make sure.
Analytics.
Yeah.
Visits.
So what happens is the Google Analytics looks at each page that the person's touching. So some of those are broken down because somebody may select one of the form pages for doing one type of payment. They may go to a different page to access the other one. And we have actually put our payment center items in different pages to make it easier and accessible for customers because people are going to access those through different methods. So that's where those numbers are coming from and that's why they differ.
Gotcha. So like the e-payment center with the 6,000 hits, that's like the landing page.
Yeah,
And then
that's probably the
someone would
button
go-
that they're hitting to go into
Okay.
that page. And I can actually look up each one as I see them, so I can get more detail for you. But what we've seen from history is that usually that's because I hit the button versus I went through finance or went through a different section to find that information, or I used the drop-down menu on the top in order to find pay my bill.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. And then, let's see, the next one, page 180. These are the legal hours. Still trying to get there, sorry. The January total, where is it? There we go. Yeah, legal, city attorney fees, page 180. It says the total hours for January are 6,538. Are there 6,500?
Yeah, those are pulled from the bill directly, so we're entering those based off of the bill that we're getting. So I can look into more detail as specifically what that was for, if that's what you're looking for.
Well, there weren't even 6,538 hours in the month, though, I think is our question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to look into that one just to get a little more detail.
Okay, yeah, if we're being billed for 6,500 hours in
Yeah.
a single month, I'm concerned.
It might be a typo, too.
Yeah, hopefully, because the total fees and expenses was 16,800.
Yeah, I'll look into the hours in the billing
Thank you.
and find out where that breakdown is.
Thank you. And then this might be a Chaz question. The delinquent accounts for the finance utility department, it tops out at 65, 64 number of accounts, and there's 935 delinquent accounts, which is about 14%. I know that during COVID, we had ARPA funds and the city was spending a lot of man hours physically contacting people and arranging payment plans and things. I don't know if that's an ongoing effort. Is 14% of our utility accounts being delinquent? Is that standard?
That's just the number of the late penalties that we've issued, the late penalty notices. So people do pay them. I think when it gets to the point where we are disconnecting because they still haven't paid, that number is a lot lower. It's less than 100.
Okay, gotcha. So even if it's just, by the way, you're late and that notice went out, that it gets added to that total number.
That total there is just late notices that we've issued.
Okay, so
Yes.
that just sounds a little worse than it is. Okay, thank you. That is very helpful. And that's all I have.
Mayor Pro Tem, actually, Mikhail can explain the total to you. She just brought me the bill, but I'll let her explain it.
Oh my gosh.
Since she examines it, she's on top of it, as always.
I was listening. The total hours was 65.8.
That makes way more sense.
Yes, so it was a typo. I apologize about that.
Decimal's in the wrong place.
That makes way more sense. Thank you.
Rock star.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That's all I had.
All right, thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. Any other questions or comments from council? All right, on this topic, just this topic. And then I open it up to you guys for whatever, yeah. Yeah, Councilmember Wittgenstein.
Yeah, on the permits, and this is more like a suggestion on, it's a lot in there. Is there a way of somehow giving us an update on what's tracking, on I know it's on the worksheet and I can read it. Maybe more clarity on the locations, because we don't always know the addresses of what current permits are being built on. And I see a lot of construction, I can kind of dig in and whatnot, and then I see a lot of it's stalled out for whatever reason.
Okay.
I see a handful of properties that have been, the infrastructure's been put in, but there's nothing else going on, right? And I'm just curious as to kind of maybe a little more of an update or a way of including that, incorporating that into that report, since that's where that information's located.
Okay, I will talk to Development Services about that and
Yeah,
see what we
cool.
can do
Thank you.
to provide that. Thank you for the suggestion.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember Wittgenstein. Anything else for the good of the order on this subject? All right, we'll be done. Thank you, Sabrina, for that. And we will move on now to City Council comments. And I open it up to you all and Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I have one suggestion and one question. Sabrina, this is a website thing. If I wanted to go, as a interested citizen, go to the website and find out where all of our new Parks and Recreation programs are, it's kind of buried under senior services, like even the ones that are open to the general public. So could we put that in a more obvious place?
So I know that Parks and Recreation is working on some revisions. They've been talking about that with the advisory board. And I believe from the update that Brian gave, Liz is starting to work on that, and she will be working with Mikhail and I on that, just so that we can get that updated. I think they're just making sure that they have all the new programs and that they have a setup for that. So that's in process.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I found them, and there's a PDF of the activity guide and all kinds of, but yeah, I had to go through senior services to get there, so it was kind of circuitous.
Liz is also looking at the social media platform as well, so there's a lot of work going on behind that.
Okay, thank you very much. And for the mayor and finance, I'm curious about the cost impact of the administration staff restructuring. I'd like to see some numbers on.
Yep, and we're going to present those next month, but it's a net gain to the city. So we're not paying more, we're paying less, so.
Yeah, I understand. Just, yeah, like.
Yeah,
to see
sure,
the numbers.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That is all.
Thank you. Anything else? Yes, Councilmember Wittgenstein.
I'd like to welcome our interim fire chief and look forward to meeting with you and visiting with you at some point, and go team. And I can't thank the staff enough for the hard work that they do all the time for us behind the scenes that we don't really know. And the quick responses to emails when I send them are great. So again, thank you so much for all you guys do.
Thank you, Councilmember Wittgenstein. Anything else for the good of the order? Oh, yes, Councilmember Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. Along the lines of Mayor Tempor's comments involving parks, since we're building this platform and we're building out this program and places people are going to be able to go see to find these schedules and et cetera, I would like to see us consider integrating North Whidbey Parks and Recreation's summer recreation program into that schedule. One-stop shop, right? It becomes very confusing for people living here, right? If they don't understand that there's different places they would have to go to look for different summer activities like that. I think as a city, I think it's part of our obligation to make sure that people have easy, good, clear access to that. And as we're building out those platforms, I think now would be the ultimate time to figure out how to integrate that. And on the other side of things, North Whidbey Parks and Rec have been providing summer programs for years and years. They have quite a mailing list, quite a following. It'd be nice to think that they would possibly integrate our new summer rec programs as far as the listings and stuff into what they've got going on. So again, people aren't confused by just going to one site and seeing a limited number of offerings. It'd be great to see what all our city has to offer, especially for those youth programs for the summer.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Wiesner. Anything else for the good of the order? All right, at this time, there being no further business, the city council workshop is adjourned.